Yep. Well, it's supposed to run an hour, but then, you know, I feel like an hour and a half would give us plenty of time.
About 60-ish people said that they were going to come, right?
Yeah. Which I find a little bit crazy, but here we go. No one.
Like how one sibling just does not come. Ozzy didn't come, I didn't come, and Zelani didn't come.
That's okay. You guys are here. Let's work. All right, everybody, so real quick, we said one more minute. This is the plan I have for today. I want to spend about 10 minutes on each of these subjects. I'm going to start the meeting now. Oh, we got 7 people in the waiting room, which sounds good to me. More than 1,200 people responded to the Facebook. You know, when I was starting the event, it gave an option to restrict people from certain countries. I was like, why would I want to do that? And that's because in the 1,200, like the vast majority of them are from somewhere in Africa or like a lot of them in India too, just like all over the place. And I don't know, like, yeah, I don't know if there's issues with them joining via Zoom.
1,200 people actually show up.
Yeah.
The computer shuts down.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I think there are definitely some kind of limits that you can have on Zoom. You know? All right, you guys just sit down and start stretching. I'm gonna get things started here. Hello. Thank you for coming today, everyone.
Hello, Simon.
Yeah, really appreciate having you all here. Thank you for your interest. I'm really looking forward. Hey, Randy, how you doing? Nice to see you. Gus, what's going on? How you doing? Some familiar face. So thank you all for coming today. I'm really looking forward to sharing, you know, my approach to applying Naihanchi with you all. It's what I'm most passionate about in my training and my teaching nowadays. Still have more people coming in. So I'm gonna give you a quick introduction as to what I do. And then we'll go from there. We'll jump right into things. So some of the Facebook posts that I've made. Hey, Ken, how you doing? Thank you for coming.
Hey, good morning.
Morning. So some of the Facebook posts I've made recently, there's going to be 5 sections to today's class. We're going to start off with body mechanics, right? So which has to do with the way that I practice the solo movements of Naihanchi. And then from there, we're going to move into compliant static drills, you know, just taking the techniques and applying them with a partner without resistance. And then we're going to move into live drilling, where we start to introduce some resistance into the training, but with very strict parameters. And then eventually to sparring, where, you know, we fight with each other using the techniques of Naihanchi, you know, with resistance. And the last part we're going to do is just hit some pads. So I noticed most of you guys look like you'll just be watching and following along, which is fine. If you have training partners, you plan on doing the drills with us, that's fine too. But got a couple of my students with me here, so we'll get started. So I just want to start with what the Naihanchi project is. You know, essentially, for a number of years now, I've been experimenting with, you know, practicing a single kata or hyung in my training, right? So I would say for about 3 or 4 years now. Although I'm a teacher, you know, I run a commercial school, so there's plenty of other forms that I work with. For about 3 or 4 years now, Naihanchi has been the only one that's a regular part of my own practice and my own study. So I really delved into this idea that a single kata or a single hyung can record an entire style. And the longer that I've gone with, you know, just the first Naihanchi, the deeper it seems to get. You know, it seems that there's no end in sight as to how much it has to offer. You know, I feel like it seems just more inexhaustible the longer that I go. So without further ado, let's get started. We're going to start with some body mechanics. I'm going to show you the way that I practice the solo movements of the form and give you my thoughts about how that relates to the other aspects of our training. So, first line up, gentlemen. So in terms of the solo movements of Naihanchi, right, most of the form is done in a horse stance. Right now, horse stance, in my view, is a stance that restricts your movement to some extent. So if I'm in a front stance, right, I have this huge range of motion with the hips, which is very valuable, as in I can generate more power because I'm big. I have the ability to move my body weight and to develop speed and power in the hips better than I can in a horse stance. However, I'm sorry, we still have more people trickling in here. There we go. However, even though my horse stance does not have the same range of motion that a front stance has, there's still a fairly good range of motion here, especially if you develop it in your training. So I see one of the key things about the body mechanics in Naihanchi is about being able to generate power in a somewhat restricted position. And once you start grabbing each other, you start to see how valuable and important this is, right? Long range fighting, you have the luxury of having a lot more ability to move and to put your whole body behind shots. Whereas if I'm grabbed, right, and I'm restricted here, I have to be able to generate power with the shorter, smaller movements. And in my opinion, this is built right into the movements in the kata. So let's, real quick, I'll just show you the way that we practice this. Start, just come into our horse stance. And from here, we're going to work our range of motion. So you want stability in the stance, mobility in your hips. So start turning. Just nice and light. No speed or power yet. We'll get to that in just a minute. Relaxed in your arms. Stableness. Everybody keep going. You don't want the knees to rock too much. It's okay if you're moving a little bit. You don't need to be perfectly still. Relax your arms. Okay. Very good. So now, same thing, but we're going to add the speed and power to it. So for first, it's just going to be a single motion. So here I pull back, fire the hip. Fire the hip. Fire. And right now, to get that speed, that sharp, fast motion, you need to have a good connection between what the legs and the hips are doing. You notice it's kind of a push that comes from the leg that spins the hip. 1, 2, 3. And we just go back and forth this way with a fast, sharp movements. Don't let the heels spin, toes straight. All right, now a little bit more advanced, right? We're going to make it a double motion. Or from here, it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And do the other side. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. Even more. Legs long about that one. Good. And now, you can see how in the form, you can practice the kata a lot of different ways. Right? A little bit more basic because I could have just single. But then you also have other movements, the way it's done in my style, right? Where it's this forward, backward, forward. So it's actually a triple movement. 1, 2, 3. So that's the last one that we'll try. Instead of a double, now it's a triple. So it goes 1, 2, 3. Try not to let the feet slide. Remember stability in the stance. Very good. Okay, relax, gentlemen. So now next part, we're moving to the actual movements found in the form, the arm movements. So I actually split Naihanchi into 2 parts, right? So it's right on the shirts we wear right here, where you have this sequence, elbow, and then we have the bit where you get into the foot sweeps at the end. And I prioritize the beginning of Naihanchi over the second half. I very much see the second half of the form as being a supplement to the first half. And the approach that I see in Naihanchi is, very much you're grabbing and hitting. That's the beginning of the form. Grabbing and hitting, right? And then to supplement that, you have, additional closer range strikes and foot sweeps. Those strikes don't get the job done, try to sweep the person down, take them down that way. That's the way that I see the form, a very, kind of bird's eye view of the thing. So we're just going to work. And in my own training, kind of moved away quite a bit from just solo kata practice. It's something that I spent many, many years doing, just, drilling the solo movements of the form again and again and again and again. Anymore, I use it more as a little bit of a warm up in my own training. And often I won't even practice the whole form. I'll just do this bit that we're about to do right now. So just doing the beginning of the form and using the same mechanics that we just worked on, without the arms. We start our horse stance. You're going to pull back and load the hip. The arms come together. Then you want that spring, that push from the leg, that turn from the hip. Load, and that same spring, push from the hip, turn. Center. Load, spring and turn on the other side. Pulling the hip back, spring and turn. Load and release. Center. Down. Again. Keep going, gentlemen. God, I should probably pin my video. There we go. So again, everybody with me? Let's go back to the beginning. So mechanics that we're looking at here, right? You load the hip pulls back, right? I'm also compressed on this leg. There's a push and a spin. Load, push and spin. Center. Down, push and spin. Load, release. Load. Center. Load. Load. Up. Everybody shake out your legs. A little bit. I got chat here. Step forward, one leg. Sure. I'm sorry, not sure how to pronounce your name. Kyus, Kyuss. Yeah, so in terms of, and this actually leads to a good point to talk about that, form versus function. That obviously when we start applying these movements against a resisting partner, the stance is not going to stay still. Sure, your feet are going to be moving around. You're going to be making adjustments to the footwork. And yeah, you might be able to get a little bit of a better range of motion on your hips. What I find valuable in practicing the way that we just demonstrated is just purposely really restricting yourself, right? You're staying in this stable stance that doesn't move, and you're developing that fast, explosive motion despite the fact that your motion is limited, right? And it's something my original teacher really stressed, was the importance of fast, explosive movement coming from the hips. My style is Tang Sudo, Korean karate, but my teacher actually trained pretty extensively in Shotokan as well. He spent a good amount of time overseas training with some of the best, Shotokan practitioners out there. If anybody's familiar with Mikio Yahara, he did quite a bit of work with their organization, and they really stressed that fast, explosive motion from the hips. And it's something that, although I think there's a lot of drawbacks to that kind of more typical karate practice, I do think that especially the high-level Shotokan, and you see it in a lot of different styles of karate, of course, but just it's a key skill, the ability to generate speed and power from the hips, that fast, explosive rotation from the hips, in my opinion, is invaluable. You can go too far with it. You can practice it too much in isolation. It's just one piece of the puzzle, but it's something that I believe that a lot of the traditional movements that you find, especially in the Hachi, has to offer. Just it develops your ability to create speed and explosiveness in the hips. But anyway, that's how I use the solo form. So let's move on to some of our static drills. So real quick, just to give you the context that we work from here. The movements of Naihanchi don't show you everything. In my opinion, there's a start point that you go from, right? And what I like to use for the initial parts of a self-defense type situation is that I would use the fence position. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. The fence is a term popularized by Jeff Thompson. I learned it through Ian Abernethy, attending his seminars. Is how I was first exposed to it. But it's just the idea that you're confronted with a potential attacker, right? You want to have the hands up for this dialogue part of the altercation, where you're trying to de-escalate, trying to remove yourself from the situation without having to come to blows. But at the same time, my hands are up because if he decides to swing a shot, I'm ready to defend. If I decide I can't get him to back off any other way, I have to hit this guy, right? I'm also in a position where I can throw a quick shot. Where I begin these static drills is where that fence sequence ends. Darshan, come on. Use your imagination here. Darshan is the attacker, right? The aggressor. I'm trying to talk him down, decide he's not going to back off, so I hit him, right? But it doesn't get the job done. So very quickly, we end up in this clash position where arms against our arms. And this is just where we start with our static drills. So there's just a clash, just contact with the arms right here. And we're going to go right into the first exercise, that first position, followed up with the elbow. So we start here. I go between the arms, grabbing and controlling. Elbow. And then we reset. And so on. So let me have Neil and Darshan partner up. Sorry, I'll be your partner. So just for a few minutes, we'll just hit this one over and over again. We'll move quick. We're going to go on to the next movement after that. You guys slide back a little bit. Yep, you got it. Once you've done it very static that way, we're just standing there, right? You can just add a little bit of movement. Shoulder. It starts to get a little bit more alive here. So not just standing still, but moving around a bit. Gets you used to that idea of finding a moment to, finding an opening and taking the opportunity. I know my head is very high for you. Try to stay in it. Good. All right, so let's move right along. Now, if you guys are familiar with some of the other videos I've published, right, I do link that part of the form together with what comes next, with the low block, punch. And the way that we practice it, right, is I get to here, I hit, he blocks, one arm person. That's my ready hand, it's my kikate, pulling back, right? He blocks with both arms. I grab the far arm, pulling down, punching to the kidney. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? It explains the sequence of the forms very exactly, but I kind of prefer, honestly, to take, in my opinion, where things start to flow and link together in a more realistic way is when we spar, right? Whereas with static drills, I prefer to work things a little bit more in isolation, because sparring is when everything comes together. And, you know, with resistance comes together in a more organic way too. So instead of linking them up together, we're just gonna make it into two sequences. So again, I start from this clash position, right? My arm is gonna come to his far arm and bring him around and through. And then I punch left. And notice some variation in the way that we're doing this. Right now it's warm weather where we live, right? So I prefer to train in t-shirts. I do think that the gi is a very functional part of our training, right? It simulates a jacket, a sweatshirt very well, but it also changes things quite a bit when we're just wearing t-shirts like this. If Darshan was wearing his typical uniform, right, I'd have the sleeve to grab onto there, and it'd be a really, really good, way to grab and control. Because just wearing the short sleeves, though, I either just hook around the elbow and bring it through, which is fine, or I'm grabbing the wrist and bring it through, which is also fine. But same thing, partner up, go through. So some important notes, so you should always talk about, although the purpose of these exercises is not really to prioritize resistance. I do think the resistance is key. I'm bigger, I'm stronger than Darshan, but if he doesn't let me move that arm, so he just resists real quick, you can see the issue that we have there. Now, to keep in mind, he doesn't need to turn much for you to get the shot at his kidney that you want. Right? Also, you don't need to stay perfectly still in this position either. Right? Really, it should be a combination of I'm grabbing and I'm pulling and turning his body while I also move myself so I can get that angle. So it should be a combination of the two, especially if he does it with me. Right? Grab the elbow. He only needs that much to get the shot. A small step himself, and a small turn from me, right? It doesn't need to be this big, exaggerated motion, right, where his whole body turns. It's probably not realistically what you're going to get. It's probably going to be more just small. So let's add a little bit of movement with it, right? So I'm giving him pressure forward, he goes. And so on. Just one more minute doing that. And we'll gotta keep track of the time, make sure we're not going too far. Don't get jammed, you need more space. All right, so let's move on. So you can apply most of the movements found in Naihanchi that way, right? But we're just going to skip ahead to this part at the end, right? Another technique that I like a lot. And I actually apply it several different ways, a lot of different ways. But we're going to look at it as a hammer fist right now. And it's just to keep it simple, the same way, right? So I brought forearm, bring it through, punch low, right? And that's actually also an application for hitting with the back arm there. But I tend to use it more as a hammer fist, right? This works especially well if he's kind of giving me pressure forward, turn, and hit, right? So the setup, knocking the arms out of the way, coming through and striking with the hammer fist. Here. And that two-hand push is kind of a specific context. Of course, can work the same way if we just do the whole fence sequence. Just clearing the arms and hitting. Right, but clear the arms, come back, hit with the same arm. Let's give it a try. It's the same arm. So again, everybody, because resistance really is key here, let's talk for a second about size and strength differences. So if Darshan just tries to knock my arms with his arms, he's got a problem, right? I'm strong, I'm bigger, I'm stronger. I mean, it can't work, especially if somebody's unsuspecting, but it's not just his arm hitting. And you kind of want to think about this at a fundamental level, that the whole body works together as a unit, right? It's easy, and it's something I see even in my more advanced students. We fixate too much on what the arm specifically is doing because the arm is the tool that we're making contact with. When the reality is that the arm does not work in isolation with the rest of the body. Right? So it's not this. It's strong, so don't, It's that combined with the turn of the shoulders. Right? Well, that way. Turn. Does that make sense? Give me some kind of pressure forward, right? I'm turning. As I do that, I come out. And then hit it. So it's that sharp turn, and the arm goes over. That hits. Does that make sense to everybody? Let's give it a try. Try not to exaggerate the movement. It's small. Okay, very good. All right, we're running a little bit late, everybody, as always. 10 minutes was not enough time for a lot of this stuff, but this may go a little bit past 1 o'clock. There's no problem. I told these guys that we won't be done till 1:30. Let's move along. So we're going to talk about now live drilling. Now, there's a little bit of a, sometimes it's hard to make a clear distinction between sparring and live drilling, right? I practice a lot of what's called restricted sparring, right? So we're sparring with very specific techniques, very specific methods, right? Where we'll be like, okay, punches only, right? We grab each other, but we only hit with punches. Or one we really commonly do is grab each other, knees and elbows, just knees and elbows. So it's close range striking techniques. I call that restricted sparring. And in my opinion, it's kind of like more of a live drill than what you would typically think of as sparring. But I'm going to show you a couple of exercises I think are more specifically live drilling. And this next exercise, in my opinion, is one of the most important. I've been doing this stuff, practical karate, like application work. I've been doing it for a long time. I did do it with my teacher when I was growing up, from the time that I was young. And he did a lot of good applications, but something that he never really delved into was, the pressure testing and live training with the applications. Everything we always did was just static with stuff like you saw there. Right. I learned I really came to appreciate the importance of live drilling, of doing things against resistance from training with Ian Abernethy more than anybody else. I've attended as many seminars with him as I can over the years. I first trained with him in December 2014. And ever since then, it's been a lot, it's been a path I've been going down, try to develop these things to the point that they work well. I've been doing it for a long time, and I started wanting my students to learn how to use this stuff too. And it made me have to be very creative about how you develop these skills. And this next exercise is one that as soon as I started having my students do this, I felt that they just started to get it immediately. And in my classes now, when I teach, like any adult students, especially teenage and adult students, they start doing this on their first day of class often. So it's some basic grappling, right? And I think it's really cool because they learn the application, they learn the meanings behind the movements before they learn the forms themselves, right? My students don't learn like a formal, circular knife hand block, right? They don't learn that first. They learn how to use it first in this exercise, and then they go from there. So there's gonna be no strikes involved, it's just gonna be standing grappling. So start with darshan, right? Again, from this kind of class position, and we just make a game out of it. The most common one that we do, and we'll go through a couple today, is just getting to this position, commonly known as the tie clinch. Your hands to the back of the head, neck, or the back of the head, even better, right? So it's just a game where we try to get to that position. Now, important concepts is, of course, inside control, right? Darshan's inside my arms, and we have trouble. Can't reach and control his head. Even if I'm bigger, even if I'm stronger, he's going to have a good ability to resist. So I want to be inside, right? On the head, control the arm, position right from the Naihanchi we already saw, and then I just try to get here. And then to talk about, just to use an example, so like wax on, wax off, like karate stuff, or we can practice these kinds of movements without any application for years. My white belts, they do it from day one. If Darshan wants to grab my head, the defense is a knife hand block. Defense is a knife hand, right? That's it. So he's here, he reaches up, I counter, right? It's that simple, right? The blocks, so many of the movements that we have in our traditional forms, in the parts that are really the truly traditional part of karate, the kata, right? They're just incomprehensible without some kind of grappling being involved. And as soon as I started doing this drill, it was just even things that I had already been exposed to via, Abernethy and people like him, it just started to click so much better for me, right? As soon as we add the grappling aspect to it, suddenly these arm movements make so much more sense. So just me and Darshan will do a round real quick. So the object of the game is just to get to here. That's it. So that was mine. So now we'll go again. we go back and forth like that. Everybody got it? Let's go a couple rounds. But, all right, so some important concepts to talk about. So first of all, something I like to say often because I do, I consider self-defense sometimes can be a tricky term in that, most in my opinion, the vast majority of martial artists, most of what I do is not self-defense related, right? It's mostly about, learning to outfight each other. That's most of what we do, in class because it's fun, it's engaging, right? It's what makes martial arts really engaging. However, it's important to have a clear understanding of what self-defense is, right? Self-defense is the non-consensual violence. It's when you don't want to fight and somebody's attacking you. And a good way that again, with my beginners, I kind of start to explain that context. They say that drill right there is a great one, but the part of it that's really applicable to self-defense, that's more applicable to self-defense, is definitely the defense, right? Rather than the offense. The offense is the fun part. Everyone wants to win, but the defense, meaning someone is trying to grab you, break your posture, Darshan defense, right? Keeping them off of you, right? In that way. That's just a good example of where we do it. That's good? Okay. All right, so now from here, this is a more self-defense based drill. So we're going to do a similar exercise. We're going to start introducing knees and elbows. And of course, he can hit with any kind of strikes, and he can also do the takedowns and all the techniques we practice in the Hachi. But just keep things simple. Darshan is only going to do knees and elbows. What I'm going to do, I'm the bad guy, is I'm just going to try to touch his head with my palms as many times as I can to simulate somebody just going crazy, throwing those big haymakers at your head, right? So we start from here. I'm given, you can start from this position, which is fine, right? And we start. Just get them used a little bit to the chaos, right? If somebody going crazy and trying to hit you, of course, I'm not hitting hard. It's not realistic in as far as he's not taking those shots, and those punches certainly would have some effect, but it gets him used to that idea of maintaining control, getting shots in with the short limbs when somebody's trying to just take his head off with those big punches. So we'll do this one a few times. So it's a great, Neil, come on up, because he's taller than me. It's a great advantage to break the posture, right? Takes a lot of power out of those punches. Right? Other things to keep in mind are angles. I'm just standing right here, and I might still be stronger than Neil for now. Used to be this high, right? Now he's taller than me. But if I'm just trying to stand still, bigger, stronger attacker, and he's hitting me with those punches. Sure, my arms being in the way is going to take some of that power out, but I'm still getting lit up, right? So it's not just I'm trying to break his posture, start throwing those punches. I'm also moving. Trying to make it so it's not an easy target for him, right? Make sense? Give it a try, guys. Try not to just stand in front of each other and do that. Always keep in mind what we're doing is not real. It may not feel like much, like this, right? But it would be a lot more closed fist. Somebody's really throwing those punches. Even if it's open hands, if you guys were hitting hard, it would hurt, right? You'd be ringing each other's belt. But try never to get to that point where you're just staying here and letting somebody in, right? You should be moving. You should be changing the angle. You should be getting shots in. Yeah. Good job. Good. All right, it's enough. We just have to keep moving so we have time to get to everything. So that right there, and you guys will see when we get into the sparring more. Sparring is more of a sport, right? It's more of the martial arts side of things. It's more about us learning how to have fun now fighting each other. And sure, it gives you that pressure, it gives you that resistance, which are really key for self-defense. But it also doesn't simulate self-defense that well, right? If you ever have to defend yourself, person isn't gonna, they're not gonna do the kind of things we're gonna do with each other because we train and we practice this stuff all the time. And you wanna be careful about getting too comfortable only working with someone that has that very specific skill set. So it's a big problem you have in all martial arts, right? And the best ways it ever put to me was like, you know, karate guys are really good at fighting other karate guys, right? Boxers are really good at boxing boxers. Jiu-jitsu guys are really good at grappling with jiu-jitsu guys because that's who they train with, right? You take them outside of that where suddenly they have very, you know, most martial arts have very little experience, not all of course, but most martial arts have very little experience against someone who's doing something totally different than that. And maybe all that they're doing is throwing big haymakers at your head. But if you never have that in your training, you're not used to that, you're not in the moment, it's going to be difficult to respond to it, right? So that's why I do think it's important, although I really prioritize the sparring, it's a little bit more of the sport side of things, in my opinion. I think it's really important to have drills like that, where it's like, okay, now somebody's just trying to punch your head over and over again. You got get in there, you got to maintain control, you got to hit with the short limbs. That was that drill was about. There's all kinds of things we can do. You do the same thing with takedowns, which is a good one. Although takedowns are not my specialty, right? I'm really good at sweeping Darshan. But he's getting better at sweeping me. We're working on that, all right? But yeah, you know, it's just you can practice something similar in a lot of different ways. But anyway, let's start to get into more of what I would call more sparring. And like I said, it's going to be restricted sparring, so it's still kind of live drilling, but we're going to start to get into more of the sport. So what we're going to do now, instead of one of us throwing big haymakers, the other doing knees and elbows, we're both going to do knees and elbows. That's it, restricted, right? For now, it's all that we're doing. So some important concepts here. The knees are kind of universal, where I can throw the knees from any of these positions. Elbows are a little bit different. You know, elbows, I feel you got to set up a lot better. I will, something else I'm not the tallest guy, right? So again, I try to always be aware of limitations in my own training. I train a lot with my students who are mostly teenagers, many of them shorter than me. So I get the feeling that like, wow, I'm really good at hitting people that are shorter than me with elbows. Which is not surprising, right? When I have a chance to work with somebody who's taller than me, I found that it's not that you can't get an elbow strike in, you certainly can, but it's a lot harder to. And I find myself throwing a lot more punches. Does that make sense to everybody? So we're working here. It's like I can grab an elbow, right? But if Darshan was taller, that elbow might be a little bit hard, but it's the same technique that you just hit with the fist. Does that make sense to everybody? But for now, just keep things simple, just knees and elbows. So concepts, right? Inside control is always good. I really like to throw knees into the thighs because it's a little bit, it's lower risk, right? The higher I lift my leg, the more I compromise my balance, the more chance of it getting grabbed, the more chance of me ending up on the ground. I dabbled in jiu-jitsu for a few years, but I'm not at all confident in my ability to fight well on the ground, right? So I don't want to be on the ground, and nobody should want to be on the ground, right? Especially if you're being attacked by multiple people. People get killed that way, right? When you're on the ground getting kicked by a group of people. So even with knee strikes, right, I'm kind of cautious about lifting my knee too high. Normally what I'll do are things like that, right, if I'm hitting low. When I do knee to the body, it's because I've broken his posture, right? So I'm still not lifting my knee that high. Elbows are a little more complicated. I want to control the head to get that elbow. I have to have that clear line. I need to also do something about this arm. There's a lot of different things that you can do. You can grab and pull, just like the form shows, to set it up. I also like to push on the wrist, and that sets up the elbow in that way. A lot of different ways. The elbows are definitely tricky. They take more time. Something I see with my students a lot is, especially the beginners, to start this stuff, they get into just knee strike battles where they're circling each other and just kneeing, right? So I always try to remind them it's not real fighting. Just relax, calm down, bring down the intensity a little bit. Try to make those elbows work, right? If you have trouble with the elbows, often it's really simple, right? So if Darshan's really defending against the arms well, right, I attack low, right? Give him something to worry about downstairs, right? Opens up upstairs for the elbow strikes. That makes sense to everybody? So just knees and elbows. Good. All right, so let's move along. Okay, so it's something I've mentioned a little bit that is also very important, because I always try. So I keep things pretty rough here with these kinds of exercises, where there's a fair amount of contact. We're hitting each other. Sometimes it doesn't feel nice, but the thing I always really stress to my students is that we are never trying to injure each other. I don't even use the word term hurt, because karate hurts, right? If your training doesn't hurt somewhat, you know, you're not training hard enough, right? The intensity isn't there, and it's going to be difficult for you to really fight and defend yourself, right? So it's not that we aren't trying to hurt each other. You know, I hit Darshan, even if I tap him with an elbow in the face, it doesn't feel nice, but we're never trying to injure each other, right? And that's what makes it, it's not fighting. We're not trying to hurt each other. We're not trying to cause any kind of real harm or injury in our training. So that automatically makes things unrealistic, right? For good reason though, right? Because your training has to be safe. If your training is not safe, it's like, you know, especially for us, we live, you know, a pretty nice part of the world, right? A place where we don't experience, you know, threat of being physically harmed, you know, very, very frequently, right? So it doesn't make any sense at all. That's like, oh, I'm really worried that, you know, once or twice in my life, somebody might try to attack me. So I'm going to go to this martial arts school where people definitely will try to attack me and hurt me, right? It doesn't make any sense. So we need to find, and that's a big part of what I'm always trying to do as a teacher, is find that middle ground, right? Where we're pushing hard enough that our training is intensive and it creates, you know, combat ready skills, but not so hard that it's, you know, opening us up to all kinds of, you know, risks of injury, right? So this next one is a little bit of a nasty one. Darshan will attest that, you know, it's pretty common for us both to have cuts on the inside of our mouths. After practicing this, we're going to do the same thing, but we're only going to use punches. And these are all techniques that are found in Naihanchi. So let me go through some of them. So some stylistic differences, right? We of course have the one we already covered, this body shot, right? We easily just throw that to the head, and that's one we'll be using a lot in this exercise. In our style, Naihanchi uses this kind of forward back fist, which I know is common in a lot of styles. Not one that I'm particularly fond of, but I know that there are some styles that they do it more as an uppercut, right? And that is a technique that I like a lot, and I feel like works as a big piece of the puzzle here very well. So we have our hooks, high and low. We have our uppercuts, right? And then we also have our hammers. Actually, Naihanchi too, in our style, has a straight punch to the body and down, right? So you also can get that straight punch in. And the line between hooks and hook punches and straight punches often gets blurred in this kind of training anyway. So anyway, with control, we're fighting the same way, but we're just trying to tap the chin with our fists as much as possible while practicing all of the, different positioning for the defense. So we go. A good idea to wear gloves for this kind of training, but we often, kind of will cycle through these pretty quickly, so we won't bother. But just if you're practicing this at home, be careful. Be careful. Take it easy. Remember, it's not real fighting, so there's no need to, go crazy and feel like you have to get your shot in. It's just training, but we're just trying to tap the chin. Just tap, as many times as we can. That's how we practice this. Let's give it a try. Yeah, get downstairs too. Like body shots are perfectly effective here. Okay, so let's talk about some more important concepts here. Karate hero of mine, I'm sure many of you, multiple Choki, he talked about the importance of the defending hand becoming the attacking hand in an instant. I'm going to show you my interpretation of that concept. So if Darshan, is the one hitting, really lighting up, I'm going to try to wrap and control his arms. Everybody see that? The defensive position is my head is on his shoulder. I'm trying to maintain some kind of contact with his arm. Now, he's really going for me. I'm going to get hit with those punches, but I'm saved from the worst of it. How hard can you really punch your own shoulder right over there? How hard can you punch your own shoulder? And then he's, of course, not getting a straight shot because my arms are restricting him. My screen just go dark. So my arms are restricting him in some way. So concept here is that I'm in tight. I'm controlling around the elbow, right? He's trying to punch, and then I just get that quick, boom, shot going in right there from the inside. So defend, so that's the defending arm. Becomes the attacking arm. In close, boom, and hit. In close, boom, and then hit. It can also be the uppercut, in close, and then hit. So you want to feel, and again, to go back to the mechanics in the Hachi, like the ability to create power with a relatively short distance, right? If I do something like this, where I go over, boom, and hit, that's going to, of course, be a stronger punch, but it's going to be more difficult because it's stronger, right? It developed its power over a longer distance. So therefore, because that distance was open, he had an opportunity to fill it, right? I'm here. That's what he does. He stuffs it. And then maybe stuffing that punch, right, it gave him an opportunity for that quick inside shot. Not as powerful, but perfectly effective. You don't really need that much power if you're right on the jaw. Right, yep, controlling, boom, hit, right? Controlling it. And so on. Make sense? Okay, very good. Let me check the time. Whoa, it's almost 1 o'clock. Okay. Now that I think about it, we skipped one of the static drills, which is one of my favorites, which is the sweeps. So maybe we go over those real quick. I teach namigeshi, Japanese term, right? I teach that as 2 different kinds of sweeps. So if I'm on the inside, so these framing techniques are very important. I really see, and you see them in a lot of karate forms, this posture, right? Controlling the arm and framing the neck. Everybody see that? Control the arm and frame the neck. Right, and now let's go over the inside first, because what's shown first in the form. And then it's this arm goes to the outside. All I'm doing is check, strike. Now, if you catch it well, especially if he's giving me pressure forward, that can take them down, of course. Right, but then if that sweep fails, at least maybe you disrupt their posture a little bit, and then my arm is right here for a quick strike. A little bit more of an effective sweep, right, is when I sweep with the other leg and the arm doesn't go to the outside, but it goes to the inside. So again, I have here, I'm controlling the shoulder and the arm head in to defend against those punches. I circle off to the side, right, sweep, and bring them down that way. So that's the way I apply those two movements, right? Just two variations of the sweep, either the inside check, so it goes to the inside of his stance, following up with the strike should it fail, or it's the outside check, taking him down. But it's really my view with karate that, although grappling is very much a part of karate, I think that's kind of undeniable at this point. That grappling was always there, right? The forms make so much more sense once we add some of this basic grappling. But I also acknowledge that I am not a very good grappler, right? This isn't the kind of thing that I would do. I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. A friend of mine, I've been taking lessons from him for a little while now. And it's like, if I was sparring with my friend Dave, right? I don't want to grab him at all, right? That's out of my element. I want to fight him from far away. I want to do the stuff that I've done for years that he hasn't done, right? This stuff is just to make it more well-rounded, right? To give my students especially, like feeling that, hey, we know what it's like to be grabbed. We know how to find strikes, how to get, the right angle to get in there. And that's where we prioritize. I see karate as mostly grabbing and hitting. I think that's real traditional karate. I think that's what the kata show us. Most of karate is grabbing and hitting. But then to supplement that, there's also joint locks, there's chokes and strangulations, and there's takedowns. There certainly are there. But I think that karate, and it's just my impression from, working with these movements for so long, that the striking is prioritized. What most people miss in modern karate is the gripping. That they don't, it's hikate, right? It's pulling hand, it's grabbing and pulling. So you add the gripping to the striking, things make a lot more sense. But then there also definitely are more like formal more strictly grappling techniques like joint locks and takedowns that are part of the art, but they supplement the striking. That's at least the way that I practice. That's my approach to Naihanchi, right? We didn't go over it today, but application I'm sure you guys are familiar with. After the punch, it's one Abernethy teaches, right? There's this step. I was mystified by those for a very long time. It's still the best application that I have for that movement. Hit. Like that. So I think that those things certainly are a part of Naihanchi, but they are not what I prioritize. I see Naihanchi as grabbing and hitting. If the grabbing and hitting doesn't work, you sweep them, right? That's my Naihanchi, essentially, right? So, anyway, I guess we're going to go a little bit late today, so we will hit some pads if you guys are interested in that, but I really would like to show, of course, the sparring, right? And pretty much it's just putting all the stuff we did together right now. So now, kata-based sparring, as Ian Abernethy calls it, or, Naihanchi-based sparring, what we're going to do right now, we're going to spar using the techniques found in Naihanchi, essentially. That's it. Right, so everything we practice, we can punch, we can knee, we can elbow, we can sweep, right? All of that is fair game right now. And of course, the whole time we're going to be, gripping, framing, all that stuff. So, back up a little bit. Why don't we do it this way? You guys put your backs on the wall. You'll go with each other too, but you guys one at a time. So kind of start from that clash position again. We, of course, have done plenty of sparring this way too, right? Where we do the more modern karate thing, the far away stuff, and then we transition into it, right? So that's when you essentially start doing like MMA at that point, pretty much. But for now, just because the subject of this class is specifically Naihanchi, in my opinion, Naihanchi is probably some long-range piece of the puzzle, even if it's something simple like the fence sequence, but maybe it's more sport-oriented, so we're doing like our long-range karate. That's a piece of the puzzle, but like Naihanchi begins where that ends. So that would be here. We have Sharia. Yeah, that's right. Oh. Oy. Oy. Yeah, so if you start getting lit up, you gotta go in. So let's stop, let's address that point. Something that's really been exciting about my teaching is when I start having to do this when I fight Darshan. Sometimes you'll experience that kind of separation, right? Where there's suddenly more space. And depending upon the person's, your position, one of you might have an advantage here. So Darshan starts lighting me up. What you don't want to do is just stand there and cover, right? Because you're gonna get smoked, right? What you want is I try to get in close, right? It's the concept of the long and the close clinch. Long clinch, close clinch, right? Close clinch, in my opinion, is primarily defensive, especially in a karate context, defending against strikes. It's good for setting up takedowns and some strikes, right? I get in close, right? You can definitely set up an elbow pretty nice from there. But in general, it's the way that I use it. You start to feel that you're on the losing. Okay. But anyway, watch Neil and Darshan do this. Face each other. Good control down, light contact, especially the punches to the face. Be careful. So, and that knee. No. Stop. I'm talking about this. Not a very strong knee strike. So kind of like makes your knee come more to a point when it's bent more. That way. Does that make sense? So don't get in that habit. I mean, it doesn't feel nice. It can work, but it's just not ideal. Begin.
If it's instinct.
Yep. Good. For a takedown. Wait, stay right there. Just rotate. Keep going. So Neil, I know, grabbing the legs, good reaction, but they call it double leg takedown. You don't want to just be bending over like this.
Yeah.
You have to be driving in, right? So you can take it down that way. And that's not technically found that much. You're supposed to just skip it for that. Let's go. It's a good thing to have to react to, for sure. Getting tackled. All right, very good. You two face each other. Yeah. Good. All right, everybody. So I think we're gonna have to. It's already past 1 o'clock, so we're going to skip the pad work for today. So just to give you some basics of it, I do a lot of work with the bob target. I think it's a great training tool, just because it gives you actual things to aim for. Right? Give maybe a quick demo, like when I'm training on my own. So the 5 things that we wanted to cover today: body mechanics, like the solo form, static drills, live drills, sparring, pad work. The pandemic has taught us anything, right? It's that, there are parts of karate that it's kind of cool. 2 out of the 5 you can practice by yourself, which is pretty good, right? You know what I mean? Like they're the things that maybe sometimes karate concentrates on. They're a little bit less practical, right? You need the live drilling, you need the sparring, but it's something that's a big part of my life. I do this every day, right? But I'll just show you a quick little exercise that I do to simulate some of that stuff. And it's what the bob target's great for this. You can't really do this too well with a heavy bag. I start just getting close. So I'm used to that close range, right? And then I just hit the strikes. And really, they're not your strongest shots. I could be using more space and getting more power with that stuff. But it just gets used to that idea of sticking close. And especially I like to practice the 3. Hook, elbow, hammer. Hook, elbow, hammer. Those 3 techniques work very well together. And so on. But gentlemen, let's line it up. Thank you very much for coming today, everybody. Thank you very much for your interest. This really means a lot to me that I'm able to share this stuff with the larger karate community. It's what I'm most passionate about, something I really love. I put a lot of time and effort into. So I really appreciate seeing this response. It means a lot to me. So thank you all for coming out today. Thank you for your time. And if you get the answer set, I think we plan to do a little bit of a question and answer. So we done. For anybody that's interested, we can hang around for a few minutes now. I can answer any of your questions you might have.
Thanks so much, Daniel. This was awesome. This was awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming. It's kind of funny how when I watch my videos, even from 6 months, a year ago, they're so different from what I do now. So it really drives home the idea of it being like a living thing, right? It grows and it changes and it develops over time. And that's what makes it so cool, really. I mean, that's what makes it so engaging. And that's what the Naihanchi project is, right? I kind of attended some of Ian's events, and I'm sure that there are people here who have trained Ian Abernethy, but like, you get so much information thrown at you with one of those weekends with him. That's like, you don't even remember, maybe like a couple of things you walk away from.
Drinking from the fire hose. Yeah.
Yeah. Mostly, and that's what he says explicitly, where he's like, the important stuff you really want to walk away from here is the concepts, right? Because the concepts are what can be applied to your own training. You can develop your own things. And it was something that definitely was true in my case, that, it's like you do one of his weekend seminars, you're going to see 100 different applications for movements in the form. What are you going to remember from them? I mean, the stuff that I tended to gravitate towards a lot was just Naihanchi. So at some point, down the line, Naihanchi started to be the only thing that I practiced. And, it's funny because it's such a world away from the karate I grew up doing, where, it was just form after form after form. And then, it's like the 3K concept, kata, kihona, kamite, and never the three shall meet. Then we were doing a lot of point fighting, right? Which was like pretty much detached from the forms entirely. And my teacher even did application work. And I went back, I watched a demonstration he did on Pyongan Odan, the fifth Pinan hand form. And and there was a lot of really good applications in there, but it was just all done from that static position where the attacker is just standing there doing nothing, and you apply, the movement of the form. It's good to explain the movements a bit, but it's not like drilling it live. Once you drill it live, and it took me a long time to get to the point that I'm at now, and I feel like I just have so much farther to go, it's that you have it. It can be a style of practice in and of itself. It's a full training curriculum based on a single form. I teach commercials. I run a commercial school for a living. So I teach Tang Sudo kind of the way that it's typically practiced. So, the students have testings. We hold testings every 3 months. So they at least have an opportunity if they train to test, and they learn a new form every 3 months. And I grew up in that system. And it's fun, it's engaging. There's a lot of things that are great about it, but there's just no depth compared to, this kind of application work. It's like really like Naihanchi. It's like the whole Naihanchi. I ripped off Noah Legel's thing a little bit with everything is Naihanchi. I said instead, I don't know if everything is Naihanchi, but Naihanchi is vast, right? That's my ideal thing. That it really is this massive thing, right? It almost feels inexhaustible. Like you could practice it for the rest of your life. You can continue to discover new things about the way these movements can be used. My deficiency definitely is grappling, joint locks, chokes, even takedowns. Like I said, I'm really good at sweeping people who are smaller than me. I've caught all of my training partners, even those that are bigger than me, with the sweeps. But it definitely, it's not my specialty. I'm a striker more than anything else. But so that's what I mean by inexhaustible. As far as I've gone now, I just feel like I more see the things that I can't do rather than the things that I can in Naihanchi, right? There's a lot of things that I could improve, and it's just fun. And not to mention, there are 2 more forms I haven't even gotten into yet. There are 3 Naihanchi forms. So, yep, that's the Naihanchi project.
Thanks, Daniel. That was real good. It's good seeing you too, by the way.
Yeah, really nice.
Yeah, we
at one of Abernethy's residentials a few years back. So
And a couple of things you said echo what we do as well. We in our school we say pain's okay, injury's not. Right?
Yep.
You can the pain is always okay. We don't want anybody hurt. We don't want anybody injured, but feel pain.
Yeah.
The other thing that you kind of touched on is sort of the narrow and deep versus the broad
Yeah.
and I you know in high school I was a wrestler and I was a terrible wrestler. I think I mean, it was like 8-40 in my high school career. My brother was a state champion, but I was not.
Yeah.
But what it did teach me is against a wrestler I suck, but against anybody who's never wrestled, I'm really good.
Yep.
You know,
Exactly.
and so I don't have to, if I'm going up against somebody who specializes in boxing or wrestling, I want to probably do something different. But if I'm
Yep.
going up against somebody who's a striker or kicker, I'm probably going to go into a little bit of wrestling and some of the
Yeah.
things I know pretty well. So I think that those were really good points you made.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I just try to always stay, like I try to have an accurate assessment of my abilities. I train with grapplers. I've done a little bit of Muay Thai too. So I've done some clinch work in more of the sport context there. So, I kind of have an idea of, it's like you're saying, at the end of the day, it's a whole different ball game when you're talking about a skilled competitor and a skilled opponent in a specific context with a specific set of skills, right? In my opinion, and I think that it's what it brings karate back closer to its roots, right? I think the grappling is so much integrally a part of these movements. And it also prepares us, like, for instance, you're telling your students that you teach them to defend themselves, that it's like, but like the way that I grew up doing karate, it's not that I didn't learn how to hit. I didn't learn some things, or I didn't gain some confidence, certainly, from it, maybe a little overconfidence in my teen years, about my ability with that things. But at the same time, it's just that if you're never being grabbed with any kind of with any in a realistic way, there's never any kind of resistance of somebody just trying to stuff down your strikes or anything. You just stay in that very specific context. One of the ways it was put that really made sense to me is said that, like, range is a really, really important concept in martial arts that often gets distorted in specific arts, right? Because if you're a karate guy, you favor a particular range, and all of your training partners are also karate guys that favor that same range. Randy, I know you Tung Sudo background too. So Korean karate, it's like kicking range. We would fight from kicking range. I had a good punch rush because my teacher had a background in Japanese karate. That was something I learned how to do. And it was like a big advantage because it was something that I could do better than most of the other Tung Sudo practitioners I would compete with in tournaments. But mostly you just staying on the outside and kicking. That was it. And it just gives you this very unrealistic idea of what it's going to be like. Yeah, sure. If you're fighting someone that also wants to stay at kicking range, then yeah, that's going to work for you. But what if somebody's trying to close the distance and grab you? That's a whole nother animal. And like, you don't address that at all in your training. That's a pretty big deficiency, right? And it's something that I hope with my students that, I try to tell, like, so Darshan, my one student, just tested for his black belt, is going away to college. He plans to do judo at Ohio State. And, it's like, you just, you're going to be starting from the ground up with that. Maybe you just have some basic, understanding of what it's like to be grabbed and how to move, with another person standing that way. But in terms of your throws and everything, you just have everything to learn. It's like, that's it at the end of the day. So it's just, that's what I try to do is we have a focus on striking for sure. I want my students to be very good strikers. And then I just want them to have a basic understanding of the standing grappling, and something in the future. Why I take jiu-jitsu lessons is because I would like to add that to what we do, basic groundwork. And we do have a couple of exercises that we practice, very, very simple, but nothing I'm particularly confident about with yet. But that's my plan in the future. I feel like I grew up doing karate at my teacher was a very good teacher, so I could strike pretty well. And that was a big piece of the puzzle. But then through the application, through the practical karate community and Ian Abernethy in particular, I feel like I really addressed the issue of the close range standing stuff. And then something I still need to address further is what happens when you're on the ground. Because I do think that may not want to be on the ground, but having familiarity with that position, knowing how to defend yourself and how to get back to your feet are invaluable skills, you know?
One of the things I do, we teach Tang Sudo, which is the distance, but I encourage us, the high school kids to all go out for high school wrestling. I said,
Yep.
it's 3 months, go out for it. You may be third place team on, you may be third on the team roster, but they'll come back and like, wow, we just did this thing out of Basai. We just did this thing out of Rohai. It's like, yeah, that's, a lot of the mechanics are the same stuff.
I tell my students I wish I had done wrestling when I was a kid, but to tell you the truth, when I was a teenager, I just didn't think wrestling was a martial art. Like, if I had thought of it as a martial art, it would be like free martial arts training. Absolutely, I want to do that. I was dismissive of it entirely. So it's
5 days a week, hour and a half a day, and tournaments every other week.
when you see it in MMA too. I mean, the dominance that wrestlers have had in MMA has been pretty special. It's good. I encourage all my students to wrestle if it's something they're interested in.
It breaks that distance gap. It makes them not afraid of putting hands on up close, and then you can still do your strikes and kicks from a distance.
Oh, it's brutal training too. I mean, one of my adult students here, he was a Division I wrestler in college, and he's like in his 40s now, so he's a little bit older. But he, when I would do this kind of training with him, I would say it was valuable, especially at first, because he definitely, I ate the dirt a couple of times with him. That's like in terms of breaking posture and manipulate. He just had such a better understanding of how to grapple that it was something that was hard. However, I would say that my striking did held up, even against him, as in the way that I could set up the strikes pretty well. But it was just specifically training with him, I wouldn't even attempt those sweeps or takedowns or anything. I'm just gonna stick to what I know I'm better than you at, which is striking. And you can do your thing. Yeah.
I gotta run, Daniel. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you so much for coming, Ken. And you had asked, just for anybody else, I did record the meeting. I will be posting it, wherever I can. So guys, keep posted for that. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so happy with the turnout. I definitely will be doing this again in the future. So you guys, just follow the page and I'll have the information there.
Way cool. Thanks so much. See you guys.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thanks, Daniel. It was great.
Thank you. No, any other questions before we go? No, we're good.
I've got a question.
Sure.
Just a thought on the entry from someone punching, that first move.
Yep.
In my style in Kyokushin, we do it like this sort of thing.
Yeah, cool.
So if the punch comes in, you can sort of draw that punch in and sort of check it here.
Sure.
So you can draw in and then you can strike the back of the head and come in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's all kinds of applications that I do for that, and
like
when you talk about,
and then you stop the punch.
I'm familiar with Kyokushin enough. I know exactly what you're talking about. That kind of big rolling motion. I mean, to me, that's the arm clearing motion. Very good.
Exactly.
Use it as a backhand slap for sure too. I mean, I skipped over the whole opening sequence with that. I have some applications for that part of the movement too. For that part of the kata too. But yeah, I mean, nothing that I do, I consider at all, I believe that it is by design that the movements specifically in this form are meant to be applied multiple ways. I think that's a part of the brilliance behind it. That's what I see in the form.
I think you are right.
Yeah.
But I think also like the way that they're structured in that particular order means that there are like sole applications there. So the reason why you do this twice is because there's two different applications that go through the ranges of the punch to closing the distance to that takedown, the leg sweep.
Yeah.
So the first one will be dealing with one punch, then strike the elbow, pull the arm, pull the elbow, sweep the leg, then rotate the arm up and then throw them back. Sure. So that would be the first one. And then the next one dealing against the two punches would be where now you're behind. So now you can grab the head like what you're doing.
Yep.
Pull them that elbow and then pull their head down a little bit and then come in.
Yeah,
finish
no,
the sentence.
absolutely. It sounds, I just feel like that's the whole thing with how vast Naihanchi is. It's all there, and it's more about just what you can find that, works against resistance in your practice. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm always experimenting, always trying to do new things with that. But then at the same time, what I presented here today, especially, is just the things that I found that work against resistance,
I like the touch arms. That's really good.
Yeah, and it's just, it's similar. A lot of time they start the cross arm that way. It's another way, but it's a big thing too that also just, I forget where I heard it from, but it's just the form doesn't show you everything, as in this kind of, it's for a specific part of the altercation.
Yeah,
The
like
verbal
the
part of
touch
the
arms.
altercation.
There's like the sotoke, uchike, there's the
Yep.
high block, low block, and keeping that pressure through.
Sure,
and the
but
change, and that adds the complexity to it,
yeah, definitely.
But,
Yeah, but it's just, it shows you that close range, kind of,
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, and I was just working with Abernethy the other day. I had him on a Zoom class with my students, and he, was talking about the backhand slap, how it can be used as a preemptive strike for multiple opponents and things like that. It really, there's just so much that you can do with it. It's great. But anyway, I promised these guys I'd take them out for lunch. Anybody else have any questions before we go? No? Well, thank you again so much for coming, everybody. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for following the page. Really appreciate having you here today. So hope you guys have a good rest of your Sunday, and hope to see you again soon.
All right, take care, man.
All right. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.